Hello and welcome this week to the Ballpark Digest Chat. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, voice of the Lansing Lugnuts, and I'm joined by Mick Gillispie, voice of the Tennessee Smokies, and Ballpark Digest's own Kevin Reichard. First, Mick, how are you?
I'm doing as well as you possibly can during this stay-at-home time. I'm getting out and running, so I got that done today. And as you guys know, I've got my own daily after-run beer chat that I've done on my Facebook page. I don't know how many people like this or don't like this, but I'm going to do it until I shave and until this thing's over. So besides that, just trying to keep up with baseball. I missed the game a lot. And I've been listening to a lot of vintage Grateful Dead sets from, all over the place from back in the day, and watching a lot of Netflix.
Kevin Reichard, how about you, sir? How are you spending your time?
You're kind of looking at it, Jesse, just working away. I have the luxury of having a second home, so my daughter and I decamped for the Twin Cities. Different window, different view, otherwise sticking around and working away and hanging out with the family. And how are you?
Celebrated my birthday last week, so now I'm the proud owner-operator of a bird feeder because my wife was tired of whenever we would take the baby for a stroll, she would notice that I would always be looking at all the birds. So this time, maybe the birds will come to us, send out an invite, see who we can come visit. Besides that, it's getting things done for the Lansing Lugnuts and taking care of this baby, trying to figure out parenting as best I can. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Yeah.
Kids aren't very breakable in the long run, so.
Might have to put the kid on the injured list. I'll try not. So far, looks to be right-handed because when I give him something, he's grabbing it up with the right hand. We'll see. I'm going to try to teach him to bat left and throw right.
Do like they used to do in the old days. My great uncle had his hand tied behind his back so he would be forced to use the other hand. Didn't work. He just ended up being ambidextrous.
Being ambidextrous is good, but I don't want to go via that tactic per se. Kevin, let's begin with the complete guide to MLB Ballparks, which you've been working on. Every year you give the latest updates, everything that's going on. So update us. Where are we right now with that?
We are coming out with it shortly, and thanks to everyone who's been writing in and wondering when it's going to be done and when they can order it. Here's the deal. Things change, as we have seen the last 6 months. Originally, we were updating the guide for the 2020 season, and we had planned to come out with it around Christmas. That stalled, and our plan was for the beginning of spring training. Well, at that time, the coronavirus had already emerged as a topic of conversation. And so we put the project on hold to see what was going to happen with the season. There is no season so far. And with MLB Ballparks, doing a current book is sort of meaningless because no one's going to MLB Ballparks. And things are going to change between now and whenever they may open this year, and I'm still not betting on it. And so we've been holding off trying to do a book that will cover both this year and next year. And next year, we already know there'll be changes. For instance, we know the Brewers Ballpark will not be Miller Park anymore. It'll be American Family Ballpark of Milwaukee or something like that. So we hope to come out with it really soon, though. And like I said, we've had to recast it in the face of the coronavirus. And again, thanks to everyone who's written in and called the office even. We really appreciate that. It means a lot to us at this time.
And we encourage you to go to ballparkdigest.com, sign up for the newsletters, for all the latest information of everything that's going on, including contraction, including news. As things come along the wire, Kevin's got his ear to the ground and he's talking to all sorts of people. And then Mick, you and I get the chance to react to it. We ended last week. Kevin, you told a brilliant story about a double managerial ejection where the two managers came back onto the field wearing sumo suits for the in-between innings game just to lay it into the umpire a little bit more. So I wanted to begin this week with great ejection stories. Anything, Mick, Kevin, anything that you can think of where you're going, this was a great ejection moment.
Well, I've got a lot of them that I think about. Growing up in Baltimore, was the Orioles manager. He and Ron Luciano, the umpire, had that famous feud, So Earl got thrown out in both ends of a doubleheader. He got thrown out during the lineup exchange in game 2. Now, I wasn't there for that, but I was at a game where Earl got thrown out. I can't believe Bobby Cox got thrown out more than Earl Weaver. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me. Maybe they didn't keep count of that or something, but I guess the best story I have has to do with the most famous ejection ever, I think, and that was in the minor leagues, Philip Wellman, okay? Right? Because it was when things were going viral. He was the manager of the Mississippi Braves. They were playing Chattanooga. He did the whole, through the grenade, which was the rosin bag. It went viral. He got suspended. But leading up to this, I worked in Chattanooga a couple years after Philip Wellman managed there. And he was very popular in Chattanooga. Maybe people don't know that. When he went back with the Braves as their manager to Chattanooga, people remembered him and they liked him, including owner Frank Burke. And so I'd say a majority of what Philip Wellman was doing that day was just theater. And that's how those ejections used to be. Like you would do stuff like that. It wasn't really showing up the umpires, but it was just giving people their money's worth. Look, I'm getting thrown out. I'm going to protect my guys. Our president, the Smokies president, a couple weeks before that famous ejection, he had asked me to collect newspapers in every city that I went to. And what he was doing was he was looking to see how much advertising the other Southern League teams were buying in the newspaper, that season. And so everywhere I went, I picked up a newspaper every day, a local newspaper. So we were in, I want to say Montgomery. I pick up the newspaper, front page of the sports section is Philip Wellman getting thrown out of a game, and he's built a sandcastle type of object on home plate. So fast forward, I don't know, maybe the same road trip, I don't remember, but not too long after that, we're playing Mississippi. And I go and interview him. And I say, hey, you know what? I worked in Chattanooga. I know you're really popular there. I heard a lot of stories about how much people liked you there, your ejections, like the players love playing for you. And he kind of had this moment with me where he's like, look, the fans are paying a lot of money to come out to these games. They're the reason why we're out here. And as much as we care about what's going on the field, and that's really important, there's also a part to get your money's worth. You want people to come out and, hey, look, I spent $60 for my family to be out here. I don't remember exactly how I said it, but this was his point. He's like, you know what, I'm going to give him a show. And I told him, well, look, I grew up in Baltimore. I know about Earl Weaver. I love that. Matter of fact, I work with Ryan Sandberg. He got thrown out like 5 times in 7 days or something. I told him, I love that. There was a time when the umpires didn't feel offended by the act of getting thrown out, right? And now, because of YouTube and because of sensitivities, there's a lot of hard feelings. And I found that out in 2009 because there was an umpire named Chris Ward that I feel like purposely would, anytime he hated Ryan Sandberg, he would purposely, if it was a close call, it was always against Rhino. And that goes back to their years in other leagues. And, and that's a whole different story for a whole nother day. But so it does affect the outcome of the game, the way that you treat the umpires, believe it or not. Maybe not back then, but it does now. So anyway, a couple weeks later, after I interview him, I see the video. He's in Chattanooga. Philip Wellman's like just doing all of his antics. And the crowd loves it. He's the other team's manager. They remember him, like whatever. The reaction that came after that is what really surprised me. And I think it really changed the way that we see these umpire ejections. There's been a couple more since then, but, he had to apologize. It's suspended. The umpires were upset. Like the video was everywhere. It went viral. And, since then I've noticed like people get ejected and they do stuff, but it's not I'm crawling on the ground. I'm going to, throw the rosin bag. I'm going to kick dirt on the umpire and all that stuff. Like the game has changed because of that. Now, I wasn't in Chattanooga that night, but I was really surprised at the people who were upset with that. And if I remember correctly, you know, he's with another organization now, and he's one of the best minor league managers that has ever done it. Believe it or not, he's, besides that part of it, he gets the most out of his players. He's great. He's a positive source for the players to learn from. He's an old school guy. He's going to protect them. He's going to fight for them, but he's also going to teach them the right way to play the game. There's a lot of organizations that need a guy like that, and he wins, you know. But I don't know that he came back at the end of that year. I can't remember, but he's not with the Braves anymore. I know there was some, I heard off the record back then, there was some kickback. You know, he'd be the guy to ask on that, but I guarantee I'm right. And I don't think he did anything wrong. That was a great ejection. But at the same time, my point is we've just changed the way that we look at those ejections.
Yeah, I too have wondered whether we're seeing more shenanigans for the cameras now that we're in the live streaming and the YouTube era. I mean, the images of Wellman were everywhere on TV news, and rightfully so. It was a very TV friendly moment. You know, crawling on the ground, you could just excerpt 10 or 20 seconds and have a great little end of newscast story. But I know that they were not. That was not a popular thing in minor league baseball circles either, and so I'm sure there was a little feedback to him and the team about, you know, it's one thing to eject a call. Crowds love a rhubarb. Speaking of rhubarb, Jesse, and they'll never be away from the game. But I think in this day of TV, people actually have to be managers have to be a little more careful rather than, you know, just have unranted, unhinged rants.
Philip Wellman, your update is last year he managed the Amarillo Sod Poodles.
Right, won it all.
Them to the league championship. He were
right. I met him at the opening day of the ballpark. Yeah,
I'm a big Wellman guy too. What I always knew about Phil Wellman was if there was going to be an outburst, an ejection, something like that, generally coincided with the Mississippi Braves losing streak.
Yeah, that too.
So good at waking up the team. Oh, it's a hot day. I'm not seeing energy out of my guys. Let's get some energy into the ballpark right now. Let me tell you a story of the exact opposite style of ejection. I heard this secondhand. Kevin Nolan was one of the nicest guys who ever played for a team that I worked for. And I bet the two of you know people who you just say, this person is nice times 1,000. They're so nice that you can't really understand how nice they are. They take niceness to the next level. So the umpire had warned the benches, no more talking, no more words after a controversial play at home plate. Nobody says anything. Next peep I hear, you're gone. And from the dugout, Kevin Nolan opens up his mouth and he says, "Sir, reconsider."
What a good way to get tossed out.
Yeah, sounds like Chris Bryant.
When we talk, and I've got right here, here's my Baseball Thesaurus. There's so many ways to describe a person getting ejected from a game, right? You can get sent to the showers. You can get thumbed out. You can get the thumb. Mick, do you have any favorites?
I mean, I've seen umpires do it in a million different ways. It's like they just point and normally give them the thumb or punch somebody out. And I gotta say, 99% of the time, they're exactly right. You know, I would never, like, I get on the bus at the end of the game if I'm riding the bus or I see the guys and I'm like, you know what, man, that's some crap, you know? But I don't know. I know the umpires are right. Like, you know, I'm just playing the game, you know, like, okay. But those guys, I talked about it last week. I remember the season where they were on strike. And I've told them that, you know, I've gone out and had beers with some of the umpires over the years. I've seen some really, really good ones come through, like Jordan Baker, you know, who's fantastic as a big leaguer. And some guys that were really good too and didn't make the big leagues. But when we go out and sit down and have a beer, I'll say, hey, look, man, I know how good you guys are because I know how bad it was when we didn't have you. Period.
There was an umpire named Brandon Henson who I got really close to. Big blonde guy out of Iowa. And what I appreciated most was we could talk about plays. And to his mind, he was always going to see it right as long as he got the positioning right. And so he would always tell me, watch the umpire's mobility, watch where they put themselves. So there was a play at third base that he told me at the start of the year, I can't figure out where to position myself. And by June, I checked in with him and he goes, I got it now. Watch where I'll be. I know exactly where I need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they're only as good as the weak link on their crew. You know, like, I don't know. I guess you guys have 2-man crews, right, Jesse? We got 3-man crews, and it's the Southern League, you know, and in the big leagues, it's a 4-man team. We're going to notice the guys that aren't good, period. And the best umpires, you hardly even know that they're out there. You know, so you're going to pay attention to the guys that mess the calls up. And I don't know about you, but for me, I've played umpire. I've been around this game since I was 6 years old, and I love it. And I can tell when they're not doing it right. I mean, like, it's like that. It's like, I can't even tell you how I know, because when you go back and watch the video, you realize, even though you're right, it seems like it's like this, but it's really like this, you know, and it's a very tough job, and the good ones get it right, and the bad ones don't, you know, and you pay attention to those. And so when you're out with the umpires and you talk to them about what they do, the ones that are really good, they're going to tell you that the crew chief makes the difference with the minor league umpires. Now, I don't know how it is in the big leagues, but in the minor leagues, because the crew chief's got to stay on that guy that's not very good to make him better, because it's going to make everyone better. If you got constant problems with your crew, it's going to reflect on the crew chief, even if you get all your calls right. So the best crews always have the best crew chief, and it's someone that is paying attention to the details and not accepting mistakes. And the other part of it too is being human. People loved Jordan Baker when he was in the Southern League, because if he missed the call, you know, he wasn't afraid to say, hey, you know, that's on me. I think that no matter how bad the managers are going to get on these guys, now we have video to go back and watch. You go back and watch, because every team has like 6 different cameras at the game, plus the teams, you know, are doing the videos. You go back and you can tell, you know, that normally it's just, you know, a little bit. And then some guys are the ones that are this, they're not going to last very long.
We had an umpire
it's
in
up
my
to their
league.
crew chief to kind of better. What's that?
We had an umpire in my league who, bases loaded, pitcher steps off the rubber, and the bases umpire shouts, balk, balk. And in the next half second says, oh, sorry. Realized in that half Mississippi, oh, it was a good move. You're good now.
Yeah. And I accept that. Look, I accept that. Like, sometimes there's things that happen, you know, like they'll think it's a double, and then they'll go back and say, hey, you know what? That actually hit over the wall and bounced back in and hit the restraining fence, and they'll fix it. I mean, you guys know at Montgomery Stadium, the Biscuits used to play this trick all the time where they would act like the ball went through the grade of the fence, and instead of it being a home run, it was a double. And then we'd go back and watch the video, and it would be clearly over the fence. It would hit the rod iron and bounce back in. I would tell our managers that were first-year managers, hey, watch out for this trick, because they're going to walk back and pretend, the Biscuits outfielders, that this ball went through these grates, which to me is really, really tough to do. But it looks like that from the naked eye, just the way that stadium's set up. Or tell the outfielders to pretend that it went through on a home run, and maybe you might be able to steal one. I just want them to get it right. You know, it's like nothing worse than going back and watching a game, and then, you know, something like that happens. It should be a home run, it's a double, or vice versa, and the umpires got it wrong. You know, like even that balk. Look, it's embarrassing to get it wrong for a second, and then having to change the call, and the other team's manager is going to come out, might get ejected or whatever. But when you get it right, that's really what you're out there to do.
So you both called spring games this year. Were robo-umps used in any of the games you called?
No.
I would love to, and I went to several this spring as well. I didn't see a game where it was used either. I would love to see how it actually affects the calling of a game. Mm-hmm. So far, there's not been very many stories. I mean, it was used in the Arizona Fall League, and The feedback was that it slowed the game down. But my question is if it really impacted the quality of the calls, or things just proceeded the way they were going to no matter what.
It's similar to replay to my mind, because when you say the machine is making the decision, same thing with replay, we've looked at it, here's what we've determined. You can rant and rave, but there's something impotent about that, where you're going, the guy that you're ranting and rave at is just going, I'm sorry, that was the decision. Whereas it's so much more fun for a manager to really hold forth and say, what did you see? What did you see? Because I know what I saw and you weren't even looking.
Right. Look, I am the biggest advocate of the robot umpires. And people argue with me. They're like, hey, it's a human element's great, da-da-da. I hate the human element. I hate it. Look, I'm all about having a machine that has a strike zone and you get up there and it's a strike or a ball. And the reason that I feel that way is that I can't stand the union mentality from the umpires. Well, this guy's been in the league for 13 years, so we're going to give him the outside corner. And this guy's a rookie and, he's got to throw a strike. That's not fair. That's not fair. It doesn't matter how many games Greg Maddux pitched. I love Greg Maddux, one of my favorite 5 favorite players ever, great person, whatever. And you watch those games, and when he first started, I remember watching him as a Cub, like he didn't get all those corners. And then, he starts getting corners. Like the corner that he gets is the same corner that the guy that might only pitch 1 inning ever in the big leagues should get. I don't like the mentality of you earned it. No, you did. It's like if you're in football and, you get stopped at, the inch line, you got stopped at the inch line. You didn't score a touchdown. What are you going to give, I don't know, Emmitt Smith a touchdown back when he played because he had the most yards of any NFL running back and not give it to the other guy? It's an issue. And when you watch games, especially think about it, we go back and watch all these replay games that are playing now. It's all we got. And you'll see that the strike zone is never consistent. It's like the National League used to have its own strike zone. Well, we got the low strike zone in the National League. We got the high strike zone in the American League because of the DH. That's crap. It's one strike zone, and it tells you in the book how the strike zone's supposed to be, right? So I want the strike zone the same. And I don't want the guy behind home plate that doesn't like Ryan Sandberg, Chris Ward, to give the Smokies a strike zone and give the other team a strike zone. And believe it or not, after the 3,000 games I've seen, it happens. And the reason it happens is because people are human. I'm taking them out of it, and I love instant replay. And, I'm on my soapbox now. I love putting the little robot icon on my Twitter every time people say robot strike zone. I put that, what I'm talking about, the little robot head. And normally it's robot head, and I'm telling you why I love the idea.
But isn't that part of the fun of the game? I mean,
no.
Everyone knew that Frank Viola was going to get that backdoor slider,
right,
strike every time, even though it was only a strike 50% of the time. But that's still part. That's part of course. I was a Twins fan then, so of course it was part of the fun of the game. But and batters still knew it was going to be called a strike, and they couldn't do anything about it. I just love that human factor, and that's why I love the quirks. And you're right, teams shouldn't get. There shouldn't be 2 rules for 2 different teams.
Look, not to cut you off, but let me just say one more thing. This is a funny story. It's Jim Deshaies' story. Of course, he's a TV analyst for the Cubs. He's a great guy. He used to pitch in the big leagues. He tells a story about when he pitched, there was an umpire that had a blind spot. But the guy was so nice that he would only use the blind spot when he needed it. Like he wouldn't go back to the blind spot too many times because he felt bad about the fact that the pitches were like this far on play. That's why I like the robot strike zone.
My thinking is one of the worst things that a batter can do, right, is take a called strike 3. The idea is if you're going to go down swinging. And if a batter can't trust that a pitch here is going to be called the same ways today, tomorrow, the day after, first inning, 4th inning, 7th inning, If in the first inning it was this, and in the fourth inning it was that, that's where I get bothered by the human strike zone. Where I say, how can he learn whether or not he should swing at it if it's getting called differently, even in the same plate appearance? It was called a ball, but now 4 pitches later, it's a strike. So I'm a robot umpire guy, absolutely.
Good. And let me say this too. You talk about a called strike 3, and a lot of fans watch the game and analysts like you, and they say, you know what? What's that guy doing? He's taking a third strike called. I'm thinking, like, sometimes guys are at the plate and they have an approach and they're looking for something, and if they don't get it, they're going to take the pitch. And it goes back to exactly what you're saying. If you're going to punch out on a third strike, you just want it to be a strike. You may have studied this guy. You're thinking, you know what? He's throwing me a changeup here. I know it. I've watched the video. I'm sitting changeup. If it's not a changeup, I'm not swinging, right? And then you strike out looking on a fastball. That's the third inning. You come back up in the fifth. You're still sitting on the changeup, and then you hit a 2-run homer, right? So it looks like you don't know what you're doing the first time up. You may be setting that guy up for later in the game. So I mean, there's so many things that go into it, but at the end of the day, all you want as a player is just to know, like you said, Jesse, that it's a strike. Hey, look, the guy got me on a great pitch. It's when you go back and you're like, that's not even a strike this guy struck me out on. And even if it's like the second pitch in the at bat, you get a ball that's a strike called, it changes your entire for that at. Instead of being aggressive, you're protecting. You don't know where the strikes are. A bad home plate umpire, to me, ruins the game. That night, anyway.
Do you remember you were saying that umpires are right, 99% of the time?
I was thinking on base calls.
Yeah. I got a story for you. It's about an ejection, just to circle back around. We had a nice guy, a catcher named Ryan Hissey. Took a 3-2 pitch, flipped his bat, took off batting gloves, started to go down to first base. Umpire delayed, called strike 3.
Oh.
The umpire saw that he had flipped the bat, because batters do this. At bat is over, you flip. Umpire thought that it was because he was trying to show him up, thought it was a bad call. It was the first time I had ever heard when they appealed it, and it went right up to the league. The president looked at the video and goes, "Oh, this player is not going to pay this fine. This ejection shouldn't have happened." And so that was my 1% of them gone, this was a wrongful ejection.
I've worked a couple years with Larry Ward, definitely one of my good buddies and mentors, Chattanooga's longtime radio voice. I mean, long time. He's a Southern League famer or whatever. He says when you do that, if it's you think it's ball 4 and you drop the bat before the call, or you flip the bat and start running to first, you know what I'm talking about, what you're saying? He's like, it's going to be a strike. There's this little window in Chattanooga, and Larry will, recross, and sees whatever he's talking about. And if Larry, he gets fired up. And he'll probably drop a couple of words that I'm not going to say. He'll explain that if you show the umpire up on those calls, you're always going to get the opposite, And I don't know if that's true or not, but it sure seems that way.
We had mentioned Maddux. You mentioned Greg Maddux. We had circled this term. Mick Gillispie, can you define what the definition would be if a pitcher throws a Maddux?
Yeah. I can, and I know him, man. Great Maddux stories, but it's when you throw a complete game and it's like under 80 pitches, and it's amazing because I got to know Greg when he was a special assistant to Jim Hendry, who was the Cubs GM, and hung out with him. He would come to the minor league games. I've seen him in the big leagues. I've been around him a lot. He's an awesome dude, and he's really smart, and he's got a warped sense of humor. And I made a list last week of my 5 favorite players ever. And I remember telling Kyle Hendricks, you remind me of Maddux. And he's like, well, I've heard that before, but I don't, and I'm like, no, man. Like, it's the longer the season went on, I'm like, man, there's just something about you. And, he's probably, look, he's not a Hall of Famer, Kyle Hendricks, but he's a hell of a pitcher. And it's for the same reasons that Greg Maddux was. Greg Maddux, different level. Kyle Hendricks, still one of the best, and has that same, I'm not going to overpower you. I'm going to outsmart you. I'm going to know what you're doing before you're doing it. And I think he's the last guy that threw a Maddux, where I think he got the Cardinals in a complete game last year under 80 pitches. Am I right?
So close. Under 100 pitches, complete game shutout.
Okay, yeah, that's it.
It was coined by Jason Lugnuts, coined it back in 2012. And it's fun to me that if you pull out specific stats and you say, who coined this stat? Name the person who coined this stat. In general, It's going to be Henry Chadwick or we don't know. Right. Except Jerome Holtzman in 1960 coined the save. And in 2012, Jason Lugnuts coined the Maddux. And so I love Greg Maddux stories about how he would use his glove, how he would signal in the signs to his catcher, which now with the Houston Astros cheating scandal, every pitcher should figure out a way, hey, you don't let me know, I'll let you know. Because if you're looking at me and the batter's looking at me and the batter doesn't know what I'm doing, we'll figure things out. Yeah.
Hey, look, Maddux would have known that the Astros were cheating. I mean, like, he's one of the smartest baseball minds that I've ever been around, like so many conversations listening to him talk when he would talk to the team or talk to me or talk to whoever, it would be like, look, if we had 8 runs, I knew I only needed to give up 7. He was telling me, like, baseball's like checkers. It's like any other game, and people need to think of it that way. It's not about your ERA and all that stuff. It's about winning. Right. And that's how he won so many games, is because it's like if it's a 2-1 game, you're pitching it different than if it's a 7-1 game. Right. I'll never forget the first time I met him. I was doing Alabama baseball for the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and I was doing the Smokies at the same time. And this is a while back. And one of the coaches at Alabama was a guy named Dax Norris. Dax played at Alabama, one of the great catchers that the Crimson Tide had, got Alabama to the College World Series. So if you know anything about college baseball, it's been a long time because they've been horrible. But back in Dax's day, they were good. And then he eventually was with the Braves. And he was lead catcher with the Braves for a long time. But they paid him well, and they wanted him to stay around because the Braves understood that whether he was on the big league roster or he was in the minor leagues, he was helping their organization. The Braves have always been really smart about keeping veteran catchers as part of their organization. And I don't understand just kind of off the subject for a second, I don't understand when I see organizations that don't get that, but they're out there because they're going to help you with your pitchers. There's stuff that Dax knows that he's going to be able to get through to the pitchers that even the coaches don't. And it was like having an extra coach, right? So I tell Dax, I'm like, hey, Greg Maddux is going to be with the Smokies. We got a game down. We're in Montgomery again by chance, Jesse. So Greg Maddux is going to be there. So I leave Tuscaloosa and I go to Montgomery to meet the team. And Dax had given me this advice. He's like, listen, when you meet Greg, you need to go. You need to ambush him. You need to be like, hey, Greg, how you doing? And then when he says hi, you need to just tell him to go himself, right? And I mean, like, he doesn't even know me from Adam's House Cat. So, and then when he, like, after the surprise wears off, tell him that was from Powder. So Dax was a bald white guy, or still is. And Greg had given him this nickname, Powder, right? From the movie Powder. You guys remember that movie? The guy that was like kind of an albino type dude. So I get to Montgomery Stadium. I go down into that clubhouse, which is, under the stadium. You know what I'm talking about. And I walk by. The team's not there yet. No one's there. Except I see Greg Maddux in the coach's room chipping golf balls. And so he's by himself. He's chipping golf balls. I walk by and I'm like, hey, Greg, go yourself. And he's like his back's turned. He turns around And he's got this look on his face like, who in the hell are you? And I go, oh, that was from Powder. And we both start laughing and shake his hand. And I'm going to tell you, man, the guy has been awesome ever since. And every time he would come to town, they would include me in anything that they were doing. He would talk to me about baseball. I interviewed him, hung out with him. He's fantastic. He's a great dude. But what you figure out, besides his warped sense of humor that likes that kind of stuff, is that he's a genius when it comes to the game of baseball. Like him telling us about, pitching as a kid and learning how to throw. Like he's trying to just imagine a box, like an imaginary box in front of a hitter. This is him as a teenager learning how to pitch. And he's trying to make the pitches that are balls look like they're strikes, like they're coming through that imaginary box, but they're not really there, And the balls, he wants them to look like they're in the box, right? And remember, his older brother Mike was a big league pitcher too, right? And not bad, not Greg Maddux, but not bad.
A very good pitching coach.
Right, great pitching coach. I think Greg would be a great pitching coach. He just doesn't have to do it. I think he did it for his son's team at UNLV. But, he's got enough money where, the stress of all that stuff. The Cubs were really lucky that he had such a great relationship, or Jim Hendry had a great relationship with him to have him involved. And I remember, he would – the way that he would communicate with the guys after the game, it really made a difference with our organization, just to have him to be a part of that. We had a guy, one of our pitchers came in with the bases loaded, no outs, and worked out of the jam, and I'm in there, and Greg's just talking to him about it, and I'm not going to repeat what he said, but in his way, he's just telling him how great that feeling is, and that's what you are in this for. The love of the game that he had. And then listening to him talk about how he would set guys up, like in spring training, he's already setting the guy up. The way that he would pitch somebody. Hey, look, I'm going to throw this guy this pitch, in this spot, because he's going to be thinking about that when I see him in August, and I'm going to pitch him completely different. And then the other thing is he told me this. He said, sometimes guys would just kill him. And so what he would do is throw them a BP fastball, right in the middle of their bat. He's and their eyes would go like this, and they'd hit it 5 miles straight up, I'm lucky. That's one of the best parts about having our job, Jesse, is that we get to be around the best of the best of the best. And sometimes we get to pick some things up.
Kevin, what did you have to add?
I have nothing to add about Greg Maddux. He's just an awesome pitcher. And I have no experiences with him, just a fan who watched him day after day, strike after strike, just dominate despite not having dominating stuff. And it amazes me to this day that more minor league pitchers don't emulate him. I mean, honestly, everyone thinks that if they just get a couple more miles per hour out of their fastball or master a certain pitch, they'll be great. But it's a game where the brains will, in the long run, win out over the great arms. The great arms will sputter, but a Maddux with that fluid motion and no wasted energy whatsoever dominated for so many years.
Well, the whole idea of having an understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. I've heard so many pitching coaches say to catchers or say to pitchers, why that pitch sequence? What were you thinking right there? And the pitcher might not have an idea. You might say, well, that was what the catcher put down. Or the catcher might say, well, I didn't think, or this is what I was thinking. And the pitching coach is like, no, you got to be better than that. You've got to understand, what is this guy expecting? What does he want? What do you want to do? One of my favorite Greg Maddux stories was just in looking at all of our pitchers warming up in the bullpen and doing side sessions, that Maddux would practice incessantly pitching out of the stretch. He would pitch out of the stretch constantly in the bullpen just to make sure that everything was sharp, because he knew that when he needed to make a pitch, chances were runners were going to be on base. That's when the situation was going to be at its most fraught. So you're not going to get your windup at your disposal there, so you better be good out of the stretch. And I constantly see our pitchers want to go wind up with runners on because they're just not comfortable working from the stretch position.
Now, do you think the technology that Major League Baseball wants to bring down to minor league baseball, the sensors, the ultra high res cameras, do you think that's going to help pitchers in the long run working on this stuff so they can actually see how they're reacting?
Here's my worry, and then Mick, I want to hear from you. My worry is that it's results oriented over process oriented. So if I bring in a Rapsodo, I can show you, here's how great the spin rate is, or I can show you, here's your velocity, or I can show you your movement, whatever it might be. And a pitcher might only look at that end result without understanding what is he doing to achieve that.
Look, if I was a GM, I would use that stuff as a tool, but I would rely on old-fashioned scouting. I mean, if we learned anything last year from the Nationals winning the World Series, is that old-fashioned scouting still works. You know, Mike Rizzo was one of the best scouting departments of any of the teams that I've been around. They're great, and they know your guys as well as you know your guys, which always freaked me out. And one scout that would come in and it would just be like, I'd be listening to this guy talk, and I try to stay out of it, you know, because, you know, over the years, you know, people have said, hey, you know what, it doesn't help us if you're saying what you think about certain people. And, you know, like the teams want to keep some things to themselves. And look, I work for the Cubs. I'm going to follow that, you know, like that's fine. There's some stuff we'll talk about, other stuff we won't. Guys will come in and you know, one specific team, I mean, you're like, man, I don't know how this guy knows this, but he's exactly right. Even if you're just acting like you don't know what he's talking about. That stuff's important, you know, like, because, you know, having spin rates and, you know, radar guns and, you know, I saw the, you know, they have this thing where it tracks, like, you know, how many steps it takes you to get to the baseball and all that stuff. But it doesn't tell you how intelligent someone plays the game. You know, there's stuff that Javi Baez does that you can't put on some kind of a tracker to tell you why he's so great at baseball. But this guy has an ability to, in a situation, just be where the ball is. I don't know how he does it. You know, he just does. I saw him save a no-hitter twice in the ninth inning. And one of them was like a line drive up the middle that, like, I thought for sure it was a base hit, you know? And then you saw in the World Series, he's done that and all that. If a scout's not there watching that, you can't put that on the tracker. Well, the spin rate on this or da-da-da. No, there's just something about the human element that I think is really important. I think a lot of teams like the Astros, you know, feel like they can do it without scouts. And the Astros are a great example of that, because they fired all their scouts, you know, or at least a big chunk of them right before they won the World Series, you know. And they're the ones that wanted to get rid of all these minor league teams. And, you know, and lo and behold, we found out that maybe it wasn't that they had these, you know, that it was all this technology. No, you guys are cheaters. You guys are cheaters, and you should have had your World Series taken.
They don't need advanced scouting when they know what pitch is coming.
Right. If you know what pitch is coming, well, good. I mean, that's going to make you a much, much better hitter, Jose Altuve. So I just feel like they've been doing it for a long time. You get around the Gary Hugheses, you get around the Tim Wilkins, you get around these guys that know the scouting, that can watch a player, that just have this ability, and they just know. Those guys are going to lead you in the right direction. They're going to help you pick the right player. And even though that other stuff is great to have as a small part of what you do, the teams that go and rely on that over the human element, the human scouting, are going to end up paying the price in the long run, in my opinion. And that's just spending, you know, about 20 years in this game in the professional level. The great scouts are worth every single penny and probably a lot more.
Yeah, and you see the teams who are winning have not walked away from scouts. I mean, look at the Twins of last year. Twins have always prided themselves on great scouts, and that's continued. But they wouldn't have won if technology didn't have Martin Perez have a great first half of the year. That was all tech. That was all him working on his windup. That was him working on his mechanics. That was all the technical staff slowing things down and helping him out. Now, in the long run, it wasn't sustainable. So we'll see who the Twins have this year to claim out the scrap heap. But I think Mick, you're absolutely right. You need both the scouting and the tech to make it work these days.
Mick, I want to focus a little bit on that idea of secrecy that you talked about, how they didn't want to let you in, or what could you talk about on the air? Because this is something that I find irksome. And let's compare baseball to football.
Mm-hmm.
Football, a defense might want to describe whether it's in zone or man. It might want to describe where it's bringing the blitz, or are they going to drop back into coverage? Is it going to be a 4-man rush? What are we doing? Are we going to overload this side? Baseball, the batter at any point can call time and just look around, and he can say, oh, third baseman's hugging the line. Center fielder's shading me to right center. He can see where they're playing him. And if he's wondering how they're pitching him, chances are by about 1 at-bat, 2 at-bats in, he can say to himself, okay, they're busting me in, or they're going breaking ball, or whatever it might be. Whenever I sit in on those meetings and it's the scout for the other team's lineup, it's very simple. It's this guy doesn't like the ball in on his hands. This guy can't hit the breaking stuff down and away.
Right.
This guy chases up. It's whether it's a secret at the start of the game or not, it's never a secret by the 4th inning.
Right. Well, look, here's my story. I wanted to be a player, and then once, I got older in college, I even managed like player manager, some of my wood bat league teams, like I love the game. I umpired. I just know it. And I used to sit there and watch the great players on the teams that I was on and wonder why they were so much better than me. I just wanted to know, like, I was a pretty good player sometimes and I stunk sometimes, just growing up, in different leagues or whatever. But I always used to think, what makes this guy good, And so I got into doing radio and I finished playing semi-pro ball and then went straight into radio, right? So, 2002, I'm playing. 2003, I'm broadcasting, right? And I remember the first couple of years, I'm like, okay, you know what? I feel like I could, I don't know how good I would be, but I could play, just think that way. So you get older, watching the game, watching, talking to the Buddy Baileys of the world, the guys that love to tell you about the game and learning about it. And I started just saying, privately, there was a guy named Junior Lake. He was like the Cubs' top prospect. And I'm like, I could get this guy out if I pitched, because he's going to chase every middle away slider. And I'm talking to people in the organization. They're sure this guy's going to be a star, or some Josh Vitters and his inability not to move, he just was flat footed to me. It just doesn't work. No matter how smooth the swing is and all that stuff, it's not sustainable, right? The good players, they just have a smoothness to them, And we had a scout, an area scout, Keith Ryman, who passed away. I love Keith. And we would just talk about the game all the time. And I would just give my opinion, hey, this guy's good, but he can't hit a changeup. And every time he's in a 2-strike count, he freezes up on a changeup. And I'd say that. And it would be, I'd be right. And, just be right. I don't know why. I just could tell. The best story, and this is, I feel like this is how I got in with some of the people with the Cubs, is I had Gary Hughes in my booth one time in Chattanooga, way back. The air condition was out. He wanted some air condition. I said, look, if you come sit in the booth as long as you get on the air with me. So in between innings, I say, and Kevin Hart at the time is the 5th pitcher on our staff.
Kevin
Hart, right? He's got an ERA that's like 7 or 8. And he had just given up 10 runs in his last start. And I saw Kevin not too long after that. And I'm like, dude, you're right here. The reason I thought that was because he kept giving up runs with 2 outs and 2 strikes. He had a terrible infield behind him. And his stuff had so much movement. His fastball was, 94, 95, sometimes 96. He had this breaking pitch that would look like a wiffle ball that my dad used to throw me. Like, it would come in, but it just wasn't working. And I don't know if he was going to get released or not. I think he thought that. And I just said, hey, man, I think you're right there. Well, I told Gary the same thing. It's like, you look at the guy's stats, he's terrible. So long story short, Dennis Llewellyn's the pitching coach, teaches him a cutter. So now he's got this coming in, and he's got this doing this, and then he's got the fastball. And that same season, he made it to the big leagues. And so all of a sudden, these guys are like, I don't know, like, I'm not a scout, and I appreciate their ability to do that. But I can also watch the game and kind of have an idea of what these guys do, you know? So years later, you know, same thing. I just could pick things out that certain people did or didn't do. And Keith came in my booth one day, and he's like, hey, Mick, would you just not talk to the scouts when they come in here? We're trying to make trades. We're doing this. We're doing that. You know, some of the stuff, like, you just got to keep that to yourself. Like, you know, and I took that as a big compliment, because I'm like, you know, like, I am right. Like, I don't have to go on the air and justify that. You feel like when you first start, like, hey, I want to prove myself. You know, it's like I was telling Gary about Sam Hughes. About Sam Fold. Sam's his son. Sam Hughes is his son. He's a scout for the Yankees now. Sam Fold, who was the outfielder for that same Smokies team. And he wasn't a prospect. But the pitchers kept telling me, like, if Sam's not in the game, they're not happy, because he was playing center field and he was just making so many plays. He was that much better defensively than any of the other players that were in the Cubs outfield, you know, at the time. And he ended up making it into the big leagues as an outfielder. But then you start watching as a broadcaster, like, you know what? I realized after that point, like, this guy has the best instinct and first step that I ever saw. Because I didn't notice it. And then the pitchers tell me that, and I'm like, you know what? They're exactly right. Like, he's in the game, and he's, like, taking, like, an ERA. He's taking, like, a run off their ERAs because he covers so much ground. And that's how you go from being a 225 hitter and getting to the big leagues as a position player, because you're that much better. And I guess, like, WAR would probably be something now that we use that maybe we didn't use back then as much to kind of, you know, quantitate that. But my whole point is this. Is that there's not things, and there are things that you can look at with, you know, the different metrics that they have, but there's some stuff where you just look at it and you're like, you know what, if I tell this guy from the Yankees that, and then a lot of things maybe that aren't good, like players, you know, crap that they don't do well, that could mess up somebody's trade, you know, because they're writing up, and the guys in town, like the Yankees may be in town watching someone for 5 days. They think Junior Lake's the best thing that they ever saw because he had a great series. Yet we know that he can't hit this, and that mentally he's just not a good player.
Let me add in.
But they want to disguise that to make, you know, you up.
I'll add in addition to the innate, when we've had players rehab with us, I don't know what you've seen, Mick. I've seen players will say, I can hit the ball harder than him. I can hit the ball farther than him. We've got guys on our team who are bigger than him or faster than him. Marcus Stroman showed up to rehab, and all of the players could not get over his height. Or they'd watch him throwing the pen. They're like, we can throw the ball harder, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
The work that the major leaguers put in, or the work that certain minor leaguers put in. Marcus showed up. He worked out that morning. He encouraged guys to work out with him. They thought, okay, sure, let's work out. After the game, he goes to work out again. All the players are like, what are you talking about, work out again? He goes, all right, tomorrow morning, what time do you want to show up to work out? And the whole team was like, oh, wait, work out 2 days in a row?
Yeah.
What have you been doing here? The work that guys have put in, I've always learned who's going to succeed from talking to the athletic trainer and the strength and conditioning guy, just to say, hey, who's putting in the work?
Hey, you're exactly right. The greatest example of that, and I saw this when I was with Chattanooga in 2007, Dwayne Wise came on a rehab assignment, and it was a long rehab assignment. You know, so D. Wise is there, and we had Joey Votto. And Joey Votto was a top prospect, but he really hadn't put it all together yet. You know, like he had success and then was sent down, and that was kind of his track record. Like he would go up and go down different levels. And D. Wise showed up and put on a clinic of how you prepare to play the game every day, how you don't take it for granted. You know, how you show up and it's work. You know, you're not standing in the outfield, you know, socializing and shagging. Like, when D Wise was doing his outfield drills, you got out of the way and let him do his drill. It was like every fly ball was a game situation, right? The way that he approached his hitting. And I saw Joey grow from that and became the Southern League's MVP. But it went from this, very young, raw, like, is this guy going to really be able to live up to the billing, to Joey becoming a man, and watching D Wise. And then, eventually D got sent, up to the big leagues. He was rehabbed right at the end of the first half. I never forget. And then Joey was the leader of the team, and it was leading by working hard. Best story I ever have is that he was struggling a little bit. And I'm at the ballpark because when I worked in Chattanooga, and you know this, Jesse, I mean, I had to get there really early because I was the assistant, which meant that I was going to be doing game notes and stat packs and pressure washing the stadium and putting up a fence sign and doing sales and just everything else that goes along with broadcasting, except not broadcasting, And it's like 10 in the morning, and I look out on the field. There's still dew out there. And here comes the clubby with the guy that runs the clubhouse. You guys know this, but maybe someone listening doesn't. The guy that's like washing the uniforms and making the meals and all that stuff. Here he comes pushing a cart of baseballs, And then I look down, I see Joey. Joey wants to hit. He's hitting from the clubby, throwing a VP. So eventually, like Joey ends up hitting like half the balls out of the park, right? He's wasting all these baseballs. And word trickles back to Jayhawk Owens, who's the manager of the team, that Joey took this BP with the clubby. These guys are all paid a lot, they're paid money to make sure that Joey's like taking BP so they can watch him so he doesn't get hurt. You got a trainer, you got a coaches, But what I got out of that, not Joey getting in trouble, but that it was all part of that same thing. The guy was going to work as hard as he had to work, that he felt like he needed to work through his swing. He wanted extra BP. He didn't want to interfere with it, what anyone else was doing, but he wanted to sit out there for 2 hours and hit baseballs, And I think that came from being around D Wise. Honestly, I just think that he saw that putting in the extra hours was going to get him to the big leagues, and look at where his career is now.
On that note, I think that we should wrap up this week's Ballpark Digest chat. Any final thoughts, Kevin Reichard?
No final thoughts. This has been the best time ever for me. I could just listen to you guys talk all day, quite honestly. So thank you so much.
Mick Gillispie, any final thoughts?
I just say this, keep the positive thoughts going, and let's just hope that baseball is played this year. I know there's a lot of second guessing or, hey, we're not going to do this. Look, it's only April. It's April 20th today. That we're not even through the first month of the season in the minor leagues and in the major leagues. Our communities need to work, and things are getting better. Every single day I look at the statistics on this. Our lives are probably going to change a lot from the coronavirus. I mean, we're gonna have to wash our hands. We're gonna have to pay attention. I'm a germophobic anyway, so I know, like, if I see you cough, I stay far, far away from you. I constantly for years have had hand sanitizer, and just stay away from people that are sick. We're all gonna have to do that, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So let's just stay positive and just keep hoping that we get to see our game this year, because I would just hate to think that there's going to be no baseball.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Kevin. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler from Mick Gillispie for Kevin Reichard. This has been the Ballpark Digest Chat. Thank you. Until next week.